Claire Donovan opened her front door, stared at me for maybe half a second, and kissed me before I could finish saying hello. Not hugged me, not screamed, not punched my shoulder and demanded to know why I was home early. She caught the front of my shirt with both hands, pulled me toward her, and kissed me hard enough that the overnight bag hanging from my shoulder slid straight to the floor. I had spent most of the drive from the airport imagining her reaction. Somehow, my best friend of 11 years putting her mouth on mine had never made the list. When she pulled back, we were both breathing like one of us had just run up the stairs. Claire's eyes went wide, and her hands stayed against my chest for one confused second before she dropped them. "Okay," she said. That was more aggressive than planned. I looked at her. There was a plan? She pressed her lips together, already fighting a smile. That was Claire. 30 years old, pediatric occupational therapist, capable of calming a terrified 6-year-old in minutes, and apparently incapable of handling one unexpected man on her porch. I'm Mason Cole, 31, and under normal conditions I estimate commercial buildings for a living. At that moment I couldn't have estimated the distance between my brain and the rest of my body. "You weren't supposed to be here until Thursday," she said. "I know. It's Saturday. Also know that." Her gaze dropped to my bag, then back to my face. "So you came home 5 days early and didn't tell me?" I nodded. That was the surprise. Claire folded her arms. "You should really warn people before you emotionally jump scare them." I glanced at her mouth. Apparently. The color climbed into her cheeks. She noticed where I was looking and pointed a finger at me. "Do not make this weird." I laughed once. "Claire, you opened the door and kissed me." I was surprised. I've been surprised before. I've never accidentally kissed the UPS guy. That got the laugh I was hoping for, but it didn't fix anything. Claire stepped aside and let me in, and I carried my bag into the townhouse I'd been walking into without knocking for most of my adult life. Everything looked normal. Her sneakers were under the entry bench. A stack of therapy journals sat beside a bowl of keys. There were 3 framed photos of us along the hallway, including one from a camping trip where she'd told everyone we were married because the campsite host kept trying to put us in separate reservation groups. We had spent years collecting moments that looked suspicious from the outside, and then arguing that none of them technically counted. The kiss at the door felt like the first piece of evidence even I couldn't dismiss. Claire went straight to the kitchen and started rearranging things that were already arranged. "Coffee?" she asked. "Sure. You still take it black?" "I've been gone 4 months, not raised by another family." She glanced over her shoulder. "People change. Apparently they start kissing their friends now." She shut the cabinet a little harder than necessary. "Are you going to mention that every 30 seconds? "Depends. Are you going to explain it?" Claire turned and leaned back against the counter. For once, there was no quick answer waiting. "I missed you," she said finally. The joking tone had disappeared. "Then you were standing there and I didn't think." I nodded slowly. "Okay." Her eyebrows lifted. "Okay? I'm accepting that explanation as evidence. I'm not accepting it as a ruling." She groaned. "You have been home 6 minutes and you're already doing the technical definition thing." That was our oldest argument. Claire believed intention mattered more than terminology. I believed words existed because civilization got tired of guessing. She once slept on my shoulder through an entire 3-hour flight, and later insisted it did not count as cuddling because she had been unconscious. I had argued that unconsciousness did not alter geometry. She'd called me unbearable and stolen my pretzels. Usually, those arguments were harmless. Standing in her kitchen after she'd kissed me, they suddenly felt like something we'd been practicing for years. I noticed a garment bag hanging from the pantry door and 2 wrapped gifts on the table. "What's all this?" Claire looked relieved to have another subject. "My parents' anniversary thing. Dinner at my aunt's place tonight." I remembered immediately. Her parents were celebrating 35 years, and Claire had complained for weeks that I'd miss it because my assignment wasn't supposed to end until Thursday. "Right. Your mom's still doing the full family interrogation package?" Claire made a face. "Extended edition, with bonus material." Then she busied herself with the coffee again, too quickly. I knew that movement. Claire only cleaned already clean surfaces when she was trying not to say something. "What?" I asked. "Nothing. You just wiped the same spot 3 times. Maybe it's a very dirty spot." "Claire." She sighed and set the towel down. "My mother has been trying to set me up with every single man between 28 and 40 who owns shoes." I remember. "So a couple weeks ago, she asked if there was someone." Claire looked toward the window, and I said I was kind of seeing someone. I stared at her. "You're seeing someone?" "No." That answer came very fast, because I'm not. She rubbed her forehead. There wasn't a guy, Mason. I just wanted her to stop sending me photos of accountants named Greg. I should have been relieved. Instead, something complicated tightened behind my ribs. So you invented a boyfriend? I never said boyfriend. I said there was someone I was figuring things out with. I pointed between us. That sentence has aged badly in the last 10 minutes. Claire's mouth twitched despite herself. I know. Then I understood the rest of it. Her entire family had known me for years. They knew I'd been away. They knew Claire and I talked constantly. Now I had come home early, on the exact weekend of the anniversary dinner, and if Claire and I walked in together, after whatever had just happened at her front door, nobody in that family was going to need detective training. I leaned against the kitchen island. Does your mother know I'm home? Not unless she has airport surveillance. Does she know I'm coming tonight? Claire hesitated. You are coming, right? I looked at her. You still want me there? Something in her expression softened before she covered it with a shrug. You've been coming to family things for 10 years. If you skip because I kissed you once, that's extremely dramatic. Once? I asked. Claire narrowed her eyes. Do not get ambitious. I smiled, but the question underneath it didn't go away. The kiss was one thing. Walking into a room full of people who already believed Claire had someone was another. She seemed to realize it at the same moment, because her expression changed. Claire picked up her coffee and said, Just so we're clear, I have absolutely no idea what my mother is going to assume when we walk in together. And for the first time since she'd opened that door, neither did I. Claire carried her coffee to the table and sat down like we were about to negotiate a trade agreement, instead of figure out whether her family was about to mistake me for her boyfriend. I stayed by the island for a second, mostly because sitting directly across from her felt more intimate than it had 20 minutes earlier. That was new. We'd eaten hundreds of meals together, shared hotel rooms with 2 beds, driven through 6 states on a road trip, and once spent an entire Sunday assembling furniture while insulting the instruction manual. None of that had ever made me wonder where to put my hands. Now I was suddenly aware of everything. The shape of her mouth around the rim of the mug, the bare foot tucked beneath her chair, the fact that she had kissed me like she'd been waiting for permission and then immediately claimed she hadn't been thinking at all. So, I said, taking the chair across from her, this imaginary person your mother thinks exists. Claire groaned. Please don't call him imaginary, it makes me sound unstable. He has no name, no face, and apparently no voting rights. Imaginary seems accurate. She gave me a look. Fine. The vaguely implied romantic possibility. Much healthier. I took a drink of coffee and watched her over the rim. Was there actually someone you had in mind? Claire's expression shifted just slightly, and that tiny hesitation was enough to make something unpleasant move in my stomach. I didn't like it. I liked even less that I had no legitimate reason to dislike it. She traced one finger around the edge of her mug. Not exactly. That's not a comforting answer. Her eyes lifted. Why would you need comfort? I don't. I'm gathering information. Right, for your report. Very important report. Claire smiled, but this time she didn't use the joke to escape. There wasn't another guy, Mason. I went on a few dates while you were gone. Nothing serious. I nodded once. She continued quieter. The problem was that I kept comparing them to you. That landed with far more force than her voice suggested. I looked down at the coffee because apparently black liquid had become extremely interesting. In what way? I asked. Claire shrugged, but her fingers tightened around the mug. Little things, whether conversation felt easy, whether I wanted to tell them something stupid that happened at work, whether I trusted them enough to be annoying around them. I looked back up. That's a strangely flattering standard. You set a very low bar for annoying. Years of training. Her smile appeared, then faded. After a while, I stopped going on the dates. My mom kept asking questions. Eventually, I told her there was someone I was trying to figure out. I sat back. There were several possible responses, and for once none of them felt especially clever. Were you talking about me? Claire leaned her head to one side. I was talking about the fact that nobody else felt right, and I knew enough to understand why. The room got quiet. That was Claire's specialty when she actually chose honesty. She never used 10 words if 6 could hit harder. I let out a breath. Then we probably need rules before tonight. Rules. Yes. You realize saying that right after I admitted I compare other men to you is aggressively on brand. Someone in this friendship needs governance. Claire folded her arms on the table. Okay, Chairman Cole. What's rule 1? I considered it. We don't lie. She nodded immediately. Agreed. If your mom asks whether we're dating, We don't invent an elaborate fake relationship. I wasn't planning matching anniversary stories. Good. I don't know your favorite fictional restaurant. She narrowed her eyes. You know my actual favorite restaurant. That is not helping my argument. Claire laughed, and the tension loosened just enough for me to continue. But I also don't want us doing the opposite thing. Meaning, acting aggressively platonic because we're scared somebody might notice something. She stopped smiling. I kept going before I could overthink it. If we're standing next to each other, we don't suddenly move 3 feet apart. If you touch my arm, I'm not going to react like you've committed fraud. I'm not pretending the kiss didn't happen just so your mother feels less observant. Claire studied me for a long moment. So we don't lie, but we also don't perform innocence. That's a disturbing way to phrase it, but yes. Her eyes dropped to my mouth for a second. This time she didn't pretend she hadn't done it. Hypothetical question. No, you don't even know the question. I know your face. Rude. She leaned forward slightly. Would another kiss count as lying? I stared at her. Claire's mouth curved at one corner, playful now, but there was real curiosity beneath it. You're trying to exploit a loophole in a rule we made 30 seconds ago. I'm checking the boundaries. For scientific reasons, strictly. I leaned forward too, enough that the air between us changed. A second kiss would count as a second kiss. Her smile softened. Very useful definition. It's what I do. For half a second, I thought she might actually kiss me again. I wanted her to. That realization arrived cleanly, without argument or technical qualification. I wanted her to lean across that table and do exactly what she'd done at the door, except this time I'd know it was coming. Claire must have seen something change in my face, because her teasing faded. Neither of us moved. Then I deliberately sat back, not because I didn't want it, but because if we were going to cross another line, I wanted to know I had chosen it instead of simply being carried by the first one. Claire noticed that too. She didn't look offended, only thoughtful. You're still coming tonight? She asked. The easy answer would have been no. I'd slept badly. My suitcase wasn't unpacked, and I could have blamed the trip without insulting anyone. More importantly, staying home would let both of us postpone whatever this had become. I realized I didn't want that either. Yeah, I said. I'm coming. Claire's eyebrows lifted. Even knowing my mother may mentally plan our wedding before appetizers, I'm willing to risk appetizers. Brave. An hour later, I had showered at my place, changed clothes, and returned to Claire's townhouse because we'd planned to drive together before any of this happened. She opened the door wearing a dark green dress I'd never seen before, and immediately looked uncomfortable under my attention. What? She asked. I took a second too long to answer. Nothing, she pointed at me. That was a suspicious amount of nothing. I cleared my throat. You look good. Claire's expression softened. That counts as a compliment. Don't start. We made it halfway down the walkway before her hand brushed mine. Normally, neither of us would have noticed. This time we both did. Claire looked down between us, then up at me with a small smile. Question. I regret establishing this system already. Does holding hands count? I could have joked. Instead, I turned my palm toward hers and threaded my fingers through hers deliberately. Claire went still for just a fraction of a second. Yeah, I said. That definitely counts. She looked at our hands, then at me, and didn't let go. Neither did I. We walked to my car that way, carrying no fake story with us, no agreed relationship label, and absolutely no believable explanation for what her mother was going to see the second we walked through that door. Claire's hand stayed in mine all the way from the car to her aunt's front door, which meant we had roughly 12 seconds to reconsider our decisions. And apparently neither of us was interested. Through the windows, I could already see half the Donovan family moving around inside, carrying trays, opening wine, arguing about where somebody had left a serving spoon. I'd been part of enough of these gatherings that nobody would question my presence. The problem was the hand. Claire glanced down at our fingers when we reached the porch. Last chance to claim this is medically necessary. I squeezed her hand once. Your circulation looks excellent. That's disappointing. Then she opened the door, and we walked in together. Dion Donovan spotted us before Claire had even taken off her coat. She was crossing the living room with a stack of napkins, stopped mid-step, and looked directly at our joined hands. Her eyes moved to Claire, then to me, then back to Claire with the slow satisfaction of a woman whose private theory had just received government funding. Mason, she said brightly, you're home. I kissed her cheek with my free side because Claire still had possession of the other one. Early, Diane smiled. I see that. Claire knew exactly what that tone meant. Mom. Diane widened her eyes innocently. What? Whatever you're about to do, don't. I haven't done anything. She looked at me again. It's just nice to finally meet the person you've been seeing. Claire nearly inhaled her own tongue. I never said that, Diane blinked. You said there was someone. I said there was someone I was figuring things out with. And Mason comes home early holding your hand. She shrugged. I'm not doing advanced mathematics here. I felt Claire's fingers tighten around mine. She could have corrected it completely, so could I. The opportunity sat there between us, clean and uncomplicated. She could have said Mason isn't the guy. I could have laughed and said, we're still just friends. Neither happened. Claire instead looked at her mother and said, you are making assumptions. Diane's smile became almost unbearable. Am I wrong? Claire opened her mouth, closed it, then looked at me as if this was somehow a problem I'd designed. I lifted one shoulder. I'm not entering family court without counsel. That made Diane laugh, and Claire elbowed me lightly in the ribs. Coward. I was advised not to lie. Dinner wasn't a disaster. In some ways that would have been easier. Nobody interrogated us under a spotlight. Nobody demanded a relationship timeline. Claire's father hugged me. Her aunt handed me a drink. And 2 cousins complained that I'd missed the previous family barbecue. The strange part was how little had to change for everything to look different. Claire brought me the sparkling water I liked without asking. I moved her chair away from the draft because she always got cold. She stole food from my plate. I took the mushrooms off hers. And when she told a story about a kid at work constructing a dinosaur out of therapy putty, she kept looking at me at the funny parts to see whether I was laughing. We had done versions of all of that for years. After the doorway kiss and the hand-holding, though, the same habits had acquired subtitles. I noticed other people noticing. Not staring exactly, just registering. Claire noticed too, because every so often she would catch my eye and give me a look that said, apparently we've been terrible at this. At one point, her cousin asked whether I wanted another drink, and Claire answered for me. He'll have one, but nothing sweet. I turned toward her. Apparently I no longer speak. You've been ordering badly without supervision for years. This is what control looks like. Her cousin laughed and walked away. Claire leaned closer. Does choosing your drink count? I lowered my voice. Disturbingly domestic. Should I stop? Absolutely not. She smiled into her glass, and that was when I stopped wondering whether the first kiss had been an accident. Maybe she had acted without planning it. That wasn't the same as acting without meaning it. The moment that finally changed the evening came when Diane announced she wanted a family photo before dessert. Everyone moved toward the fireplace with the usual confusion of adults, suddenly forgetting how Rose worked. Couples naturally collected beside each other. I stayed near the edge because whatever Claire and I were doing, I didn't want to let a group photograph decide it for us. Diane noticed me and pointed toward Claire. Mason, go stand beside her. I started to step away instead. I'll take the photo. Claire's hand closed around my wrist before I got far. Stay, she said. It wasn't loud, nobody else reacted. But I did. I looked at her, giving her every chance to turn it into another joke. Claire didn't. She simply moved half a step closer until our shoulders touched, so I stayed. The timer blinked on Diane's phone. Everybody complained about somebody blocking somebody else, and Claire slipped her arm around mine just before the picture was taken. It was probably going to look perfectly ordinary to everyone who had known us for years. To me, it felt like the first time Claire had chosen the implication while fully aware of what it was. Later, I found her alone on the back patio carrying 2 slices of anniversary cake. She handed one to me. Bribery. For what? For not escaping through a bathroom window. I took the plate, still considering it. The evening air was cooler than I'd expected, and Claire folded her arms after setting her cake on the railing. For a moment, we watched the family through the glass doors. Then I asked, "Why did you make me stay in the picture?" She knew exactly what I meant. Her eyes remained on the room behind us. Because I wanted you there. Because correcting your mom would have been awkward. Claire looked at me then. No, because I wanted you beside me. There was no joke attached to it. That mattered more than I expected. I put my plate down beside hers. I want you too. Claire's expression softened, but I kept going. I just don't want your mom guessing correctly to become the reason we call this something. She nodded slowly. Neither do I. I had expected her to be disappointed. Instead, she looked relieved. I don't want to wake up tomorrow as your girlfriend, because nobody corrected Aunt Susan before dessert. I smiled. That would be a weak origin story. Embarrassing, honestly. She stepped closer. But I also don't want us pretending tonight didn't tell us anything. It told me quite a lot. Such as he looked at her. You kissing me wasn't meaningless. Her smile was small now. No, and me holding your hand wasn't either. No, and making me stay in that photo? Claire lifted one eyebrow. You really are going to document every exhibit. Professional habit. She laughed quietly, but neither of us moved away. For the first time that day, the question wasn't whether Claire wanted me. I knew she did. She knew I wanted her. The harder question had become what we were willing to do about it when there was nobody else around to make assumptions for us. Claire glanced through the glass doors at her family, then back at me. Can we leave? You want to leave your parents' anniversary party? They've been married 35 years. I think they'll survive dessert without us. 20 minutes later, we were back outside her townhouse. The family noise was gone. Her mother's assumptions were miles behind us, and there was nobody standing nearby to decide what we looked like. Claire turned toward me on the walkway and tucked her hands into the pockets of her coat. Okay, she said. We're obviously not very good at being just friends anymore. I smiled. That's becoming difficult to defend. And I'm not calling you my boyfriend because my mother beat us to the conclusion. Agreed. Claire looked up at me, amusement fading into something more vulnerable. So what exactly are we supposed to do with the part in between? This time, I didn't have a technical answer. Claire stood under the porch light, waiting for me to solve a problem I'd spent years avoiding by pretending it wasn't one. The space between best friends and boyfriend and girlfriend had always seemed theoretical until she kissed me, held my hand in front of her family, and asked me what came next. I looked at her for a moment, then said, I think we stop letting accidents make the decisions. She tilted her head. Meaning? I took my phone out of my pocket, opened the calendar, and pretended to study it with ridiculous seriousness. Claire Donovan, are you available tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. for an actual date? Her mouth slowly curved. You are asking me out while standing 6 feet from my front door. Location should not invalidate procedure. And if I say no, I'll assume you have terrible judgment. She laughed and stepped closer. Yes, Mason, tomorrow night. Actual date. No technical objections. I drove home alone instead of staying at her place, even though neither of us said that was required. It felt important to create one clean line between what we'd always done and what we were choosing now. The next evening, I picked her up instead of texting that I was outside. Claire opened the door in dark jeans, boots, and a cream sweater, then immediately leaned against the frame with a suspicious expression. You're staring, I nodded. I am. No defensive joke? You look beautiful. She blinked once, and for maybe the first time in our friendship, Claire Donovan appeared genuinely unprepared for me. That's unfair, she said. Why? You're supposed to insult one accessory so I can recover. I looked down at her earrings. Those seem competent. She laughed, but her cheeks were still pink when she locked the door. We went to a small neighborhood restaurant we'd passed dozens of times, and somehow never tried, because our usual dinners together were based on convenience, coupons, or which one of us had forgotten groceries. The difference wasn't the restaurant. It was that neither of us could pretend we hadn't chosen the evening for one reason. Claire reached across the table to steal one of my fries, stopped halfway, and raised an eyebrow. Does stealing food count as romantic now? I pushed the plate toward her. No. That's still criminal. Good. I need some continuity. We talked the way we always had, except we didn't keep swerving away whenever the conversation became too personal. I told her I had missed the sound of her laugh while I was away more than I had admitted to anyone. She told me she had kept opening our message thread at night, even when she had nothing useful to say. Neither confession needed a speech. Once they were said, we let them stay said. After dinner, we walked a few blocks because neither of us seemed eager to end the night. Claire slipped her arm through mine, and this time she didn't ask whether it counted. I noticed that more than I should have. You've been quiet for almost 30 seconds, she said. Should I call someone? I'm thinking. Dangerous. I glanced at her. I keep wanting certainty before I decide what this is. Claire's steps slowed. Because you're unsure about me? No. That's the irritating part. I stopped near the edge of a closed bookstore, turning toward her. I'm sure I want you. I'm not sure what happens if we're terrible at this. We've been friends for 11 years. There isn't a reset button if we make a mess. Claire didn't answer immediately. She looked down the empty sidewalk, then back at me. I get that. Her voice was softer now, but you keep talking like not choosing is safer. It isn't. We already changed things. I knew she was right before she finished. She wasn't accusing me of cowardice or demanding a promise. She was simply pointing at the obvious consequence. We had kissed, We had held hands, we'd gone on a date because I asked her. Whatever happened next, the friendship I was supposedly protecting was already different. I rubbed the back of my neck. I hate when your argument is structurally sound. I know. It's my most attractive quality. At her townhouse, we stopped in the same place where she'd asked what existed between friendship and a relationship. The porch light caught the amusement in her face, but she didn't step closer this time. I need one thing to be clear, she said. I'm not asking you to promise forever because we had one good date. I nodded. Good, because that would be an aggressive first date policy, but I'm also not going back to pretending we're platonic. Her expression grew more serious. And I don't want us kissing whenever we feel like it, acting like a couple whenever it's convenient, then hiding behind we're figuring it out for 6 months. The words hit because they described exactly the comfortable middle ground I could have lived in indefinitely. I could have convinced myself we were being careful, while accepting every part of a relationship except responsibility for defining it. Claire knew me well enough to see that possibility before I did. That's fair, I said. She studied me as if expecting a qualification. I didn't give her one. You don't have to decide tonight, she said, but I'm not going to make the next move for you. Her smile returned, smaller this time. I've already contributed 1 surprise kiss, 1 hand-holding incident, and 1 public photo. My department has exceeded budget. I laughed, but when she reached for the door, I caught her hand. Claire turned back. For a second, I considered kissing her. I wanted to badly enough that it made my chest tight, and judging by the way her eyes dropped to my mouth, she would have let me. Instead, I lifted her hand and pressed a brief kiss to her knuckles. It wasn't dramatic, but it was deliberate. Good night, Claire. Her expression softened. Good night, Mason. She went inside without looking disappointed, which somehow made the decision harder. She hadn't punished me for hesitating. She had simply removed the option of pretending hesitation meant nothing. On the drive home, every piece of the last 2 days lined up with uncomfortable precision. Claire had kissed me because seeing me had broken through whatever restraint she'd been maintaining. I had chosen to hold her hand. I had stayed beside her in that family picture. I had asked her on a date because I wanted one, and I'd spent the entire evening wanting another. None of those things had happened to me. I had participated in every one of them. By the time I parked outside my apartment, I understood what Claire had actually left me with. The next time I stood at her door, I couldn't arrive with another technical argument, another temporary rule, or another reason to wait until certainty magically appeared. The next knock had to be an answer. I slept badly, which was irritating because nothing was actually wrong. Claire hadn't rejected me. We hadn't argued. Nobody had betrayed anybody, moved across the country, or announced that our friendship was ruined. She had simply asked me to stop treating uncertainty like an excuse, and apparently my brain found that more threatening than an actual emergency. By 8 a.m., I had replayed the last 2 days enough times to notice something embarrassingly obvious. I'd kept telling myself I needed to decide whether changing our friendship was worth the risk, but I had already changed it every time the decision belonged to me. I had held her hand. I had stayed beside her in that family photo. I had asked her on a date. I had wanted to kiss her goodnight badly enough that not doing it had required actual effort. The evidence wasn't waiting for interpretation anymore. I was at 9:18 a.m. I parked outside Claire's townhouse and walked up the same path I'd taken when I came home early. This time there was no suitcase, no surprise return, and no reasonable way to claim I had accidentally arrived at her door with romantic intentions. I knocked. A few seconds later, Claire opened it wearing black leggings, an oversized college sweatshirt, and the expression of a woman who had expected absolutely nobody. Her hair was twisted into a loose knot, and she was holding a spoon covered in what looked like peanut butter. You have developed a dangerous habit of appearing at my house with emotional complications, she said. I looked at the spoon. I'm interrupting breakfast. You're interrupting peanut butter straight from the jar, which is less defensible. She stepped aside automatically, then stopped herself. Actually, no. You came here for a reason. Say the reason first. I laughed under my breath. You're enforcing porch jurisdiction now? I learned from the chairman. Claire leaned against the doorframe, but underneath the teasing, I could see the question she'd left with me the night before. She wasn't going to answer it for me. That was exactly why I had come. I put my hands in my jacket pockets so I wouldn't start gesturing like a man presenting quarterly results. I don't want to be your boyfriend because your mother guessed correctly. Claire's eyebrows lifted. Strong opening. I'm working through it. She pressed her lips together. I continued. I don't want it because you kissed me first, or because we've already spent years doing things everybody else thinks look suspicious, or because becoming a couple would be the easiest explanation for the last 48 hours. Claire's amusement faded, and I could tell she was listening carefully now. Okay. I looked at her and finally stopped building the argument around what I didn't want. I want to date you because I want you, deliberately. I want another date and another one after that. I want to kiss you without us spending 20 minutes arguing about what category the kiss belongs in. I want to be the person who gets introduced as your boyfriend because we decided that's what I am, not because everybody got tired of waiting for us to notice. Claire stared at me, completely still. For one horrible second, I wondered whether I'd somehow turned a simple answer into a hostage negotiation. Then her mouth curved. So your official position is that this counts? I laughed, and the tension left my shoulders so quickly it almost made me dizzy. Yes, no appeal, no technical review. She took one small step toward me. And you're asking whether I want the same thing? I am. Claire looked down for a second, and when she raised her eyes again, there was nothing playful hiding the answer. Yes, Mason, I choose it too. I barely had time to smile before she lifted the peanut butter spoon between us. However, I need it documented that I got there first. Absolutely not. I kissed you first. You ambushed me, romantically. Procedural misconduct. She laughed, and I reached for her free hand. This time I was the one who threaded our fingers together first. Claire looked down at them, then up at me. Neither of us asked whether it counted. We didn't need to. Claire already had plans to meet her parents for a late family lunch, and 20 minutes later I found myself going with her. Not because Diane expected it. Claire asked, and I wanted to. That distinction had become surprisingly important. When we arrived, Diane opened the door and smiled at me with exactly the expression I'd been expecting. Mason. Claire didn't say her friend was coming. Claire looked at me, clearly waiting to see what I'd do. 2 days earlier, I probably would have hidden inside some technically accurate answer. Instead, I said, boyfriend, actually. Diane blinked once. Claire made a small sound beside me that might have been a laugh or surprise. Then Diane smiled like she'd just won something. I see. Claire pointed at her. Do not make this about you. I didn't say anything. Your face is saying several things. I squeezed Claire's hand and leaned closer. She's making assumptions. Claire looked at me and smiled. This time they're allowed. That evening, I drove Claire home. We stood outside the same front door where she'd kissed me before I understood what the day was about. Claire rested one shoulder against the frame and looked up at me. Interesting, she said. What? Last time you stood there, I did all the work. I stepped closer. You were very efficient. And now? Her smile was teasing, but she stayed exactly where she was. No pulling me forward. No solving the moment for me. She had promised the next move was mine, so I made it. I put one hand lightly against her waist, gave her enough time to decide whether she wanted the distance closed, and kissed her. Claire's fingers curled into the front of my jacket almost exactly the way they had the morning I came home. Except this time, nothing about it felt accidental. When we separated, she stayed close and murmured, "For the record, that definitely counted." I smiled finally. We agree on the criteria. For years, people had looked at Claire and me and assumed we were already together. I used to think they were seeing something we weren't. They weren't. They were seeing a possibility we kept refusing to choose. Coming home early didn't magically turn my best friend into the woman I loved. It just put me at her door at exactly the moment we both ran out of believable reasons to keep pretending the difference didn't matter.
Looking back, what changed everything was not simply that Claire kissed Mason at the door. It was the fact that his early return forced both of them to confront something they had been explaining away for years. Claire had already stopped taking other dates seriously because she kept comparing those men to Mason, and when her mother pressured her about whether there was someone in her life, the answer she gave was vague because the real situation was vague. She knew why nobody else felt right, but she and Mason had never actually chosen to call their connection romantic. Once Mason understood that, the family anniversary dinner became more than an awkward misunderstanding. They agreed not to lie, but they also refused to perform a version of friendship that no longer felt honest. Mason deliberately held Claire's hand. Claire kept him beside her for the family photo, and neither of them corrected every assumption because those gestures were no longer accidental. By that point, the important thing was not what Claire's mother thought. It was that Mason and Claire were beginning to make choices that matched what they already felt. The patio conversation made that distinction clear. Mason did not want a family assumption to decide their relationship for them, and Claire did not want one impulsive kiss to do it either. So Mason asked her on a real date, creating a deliberate step between the friendship they had known and whatever came next. The date confirmed that the attraction was mutual, but it also exposed Mason's biggest hesitation. He was not unsure about wanting Claire. He was afraid that if they handled the relationship badly, they could damage a friendship that had lasted 11 years. Claire did not dismiss that fear, but she refused to let uncertainty become a permanent hiding place. She made it clear that she would not spend months kissing him, acting like a couple when it felt convenient, and then retreating behind the excuse that they were still figuring things out. That boundary left Mason with a choice he could no longer reduce to definitions or technicalities. When he looked back at the previous 2 days, he realized that every meaningful step had already included his own consent and participation. He had held her hand, stayed beside her in the photo, asked her out, and wanted the relationship to continue. So when Mason returned to Claire's porch the next morning, he finally gave her an answer instead of another argument. He told her he wanted to date her because he wanted her deliberately, not because she had kissed him first and not because her family had guessed correctly. Claire chose the same thing. From there, introducing himself as her boyfriend and later kissing her at the door were not dramatic twists. They were simply the first moments when both of them stopped letting circumstance define a relationship they were finally willing to choose for themselves. That is what makes the ending work so well. The real tension was never whether these two people cared about each other. Their history made that obvious. The tension came from the difference between having feelings and accepting responsibility for what those feelings change. Mason kept reaching for certainty because certainty would have made the risk easier to justify, while Claire understood that avoiding a label could become its own decision if they kept taking all the benefits of a relationship without acknowledging what they were doing. Claire's boundary is especially important because she does not demand an instant promise or punish Mason for being cautious. She simply refuses an indefinite middle ground. That gives Mason room to think while also making it clear that hesitation cannot be used forever as protection from consequences. In that sense, the story treats boundaries as something more useful than an ultimatum. Her boundary does not force his answer. It forces him to make his own answer honestly. And Mason's final choice matters because it is specific. He is not choosing Claire because everyone around them thinks they belong together. He is choosing her after separating outside expectations from his own actions and feelings. Their long friendship gives the relationship history, trust, and familiarity, but it does not automatically guarantee success. What changes at the end is that both of them finally accept that preserving the old version of the friendship is no longer possible, and they would rather move forward deliberately than keep pretending nothing has changed. If you were in Mason's place, would you risk an 11-year friendship once you knew the feelings were mutual? Or would the possibility of losing that friendship still make you hesitate? Tell me how you would handle it in the comments. If you enjoy slow burn relationship stories where the hardest choice is finally admitting what has been there all along, like the video and subscribe for more.